Okay, and then I'll do the first few slides.
Yep.
Okay, why don't you just give us a go or something?
Oh, okay, I can introduce you. Thanks everybody for joining today's FDTD Go 16 Applications webinar, and we're pleased to have Mike Baker from the Weather Service in Boulder leading our discussion today. And to lead us off here, we'll have Ed Zook for the first couple minutes here.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Ed, and excuse me. I've worked with Mike for many years. I work here at the lab in Boulder, the NOAA lab, and interacted with the WFO for many years. Mike's going to talk about creating color tables in AWIPS. First, we have just a few bookkeeping slides. All this content is recorded, and there is a satellite chat library, if you've missed some of the earlier ones, at that website. And we're always open to more speakers, so if you'd like to talk on a topic, let us know. Send an email to Dan or myself. Just a little protocol. Will be about 20 minutes, and then we'll have a little Q&A. There's a few things. Mute your phone, if you would, when you're not talking. Just to first introduce Mike, he has many degrees, as I found out. He had a bachelor's in geography, then a master's in geography and climate studies, and then he went off to teach in Spain for a couple of years. And I first met Mike, he was a volunteer at the weather office in the mid-'80s when it was down in Denver, and he was working on a bachelor's in meteorology at Metro State. And then after a couple of years of that, he became an intern and worked his way up to a forecaster. And he claims he's going to retire fairly soon. We'll see about that. So why create a new satellite color table? Well, you know, Mike has created many color tables over the years, and not just for satellite. I use his GFE one, for example. He's done a great job. He has a little hobby in art, so he'll show us some of that influence, I think, when we go through this. But we need, for some of the, you know, there are, of course, default color tables, but some of the old color tables just simply don't work, as I'll demonstrate in a moment. And Mike has various reasons that he'll explain why he does a color table. But just to point out some issues with using the old color tables that worked, you know, with Go's, the previous version that goes. Here's an example, you know, with the correct color table shown there, one of the default color tables for water vapor imagery. But if we applied the old color table, this is what we get. So if I step back and forth, you see the colors just don't match because the scaling is different. And so you won't get the expected result. So you have to be careful not to use some of these old color tables. So what Mike has done is begin with some of the new color tables, the default ones, and modify those. So Mike will now take over. Welcome, Mike.
Yeah. Good afternoon. How you doing, everybody? I've been playing with color curves and color tables for going on as long as we've had AWIPS, 25 years. And so I've given this opportunity to work with a satellite now, Go 16. It's really exciting. Reasons for making new color curves with the color table editor. I found out I need to increase the resolution of some of the color bands across the full range of the colors to improve the resolution of what I'm looking at. I also like to use the grays and the colors to highlight different features, and sometimes in combination, the grays and the colors work nicely to enhance different cloud features, ground features, surface features, and so forth. One way I accomplish this, and you can accomplish this, is with the use of the color table editor tool in AWIPS, starting with the default color table. That says cold table, color table. You just caught that. It's on the right side there. You can go inside of AWIPS there and call that up. I'm not sure exactly where that is. I know it all the time by heart, but there's the edit window right there. And so we're going to be playing with that color band you see in the middle of the screen there, and it has the upper colors and lower colors there we can work with. And it's important to keep an eye on that. I do not use the alpha setting there. Stay away from that. And when you play with it, you'll see why you may not or may want to use that. But I try to avoid using that. I just use the green, red, and blues in the lower and upper color schemes to develop my color curves. First one I'm just kind of pointing out, here's an example of contrasting between the default and a new color table that I've developed. This is just for the 6.19 water vapor. One on top is the default, the bottom one is a new one, a new color table I made for that. I have about at least 3 or 4 different versions of this color table, but this is just one for now. Just showing some of the changes in the color from the red band at the bottom of the image down to kind of more of a muted reddish-brown tone on the bottom. And there's reasons for that, and I'll explain as we go along. Here's an example, close-up of that same 6.19 water vapor image. We're gonna edit this on the fly here, just kind of a couple of steps that I would think in my process of doing something like this. You notice the reds there, the reds and browns tend to be the warmer, drier areas. The grays going up into the blues would be the wetter, the colder areas on this water vapor. And so we'll go with kind of follow along here as I work with this. Again, this is the 6.19 water vapor default color table. I have the color table in the upper right corner there. You can see this is the default color band going across the screen there. You can see it's kind of sharp edges to it, and I work with those sharp edges. Those are something that I've developed about maybe 15, 20 years ago to kind of mute some of those edges. You can see how sharply they go from yellows to reds. And I work with those to get a little more definition, to enhance some of the features in the clouds and the water vapor by doing that. And you'll see as we go along. Oh, by the way, in just a second, the lower right left corner, there's an imaging tool there, and I'll make mention of that in just a second. Okay, here's where we're going to do a few steps here to edit that previous image. Right off the bat, I point in the lower left corner there. Do not make any changes with the image adjustment tool at this point. So we're starting out, try to max out the brightness, the contrast, and the alpha at 100%. Leave that alone. We'll do that at the end before you save it into a bundle. Going up now to the upper right corner there, you have your edit tool. And what I usually do at this very first step, I take the default color, and like we had in the previous slide, and I kind of work from left to right across the band. Usually with water vapor, it starts on the left with the warmer browns and the reds. And I'll start moving across because I really want my resolution, my detail to be where I want to be, the water vapor, in the cloud areas, the higher water concentration areas. So I kind of smooth out to the browns and reds, starting out with the drier and warmer areas. Here's another feature. Here's the previous one. You see grays and blues, and it goes into that pinkish color. Here's the next step. I'll go in and I'll start working with the edit tool up there, and you can see the 2 arrows. There's an arrow on top and an arrow on bottom and a dash line in between. That's where we do the upper color and the bottom and the lower color. And so we want to develop a range of colors, and to do that, we need to set the arrows from the first arrow, the white arrow you see in the color bar there. That will refer to all your adjustments in the upper colors, and the other arrow, which is a green in this case, will be the other end of the color range that I'm going to be working with. So in this case, I'm going to start working with the whites and the greens in this example, and this is where I start playing with the boundary between the warm and the dry areas, the warm and the cold areas, and I'll start focusing on along the edge here. This is my main focus on this slide. Focus on that interface between the greens and the browns. Just watch how this progresses here as we adjust that. The next slide, what I was telling you earlier, how I like to smooth the edges. Here it is. See how nice and sharp it is? And that's how a lot of the default colors are in. I like to get a little more resolution. I feel like I'm losing some detail, some information along these interfaces between the warm and dry. So the next step is just kind of do some blending here along the edges. Start smoothing them out. I've also brought in a little bit of green here, some more blues. You can see the resolutions. The darker areas are now getting a little more highlighting in here. You can almost see the gravity waves now developing across Utah there, some of the edges. It's kind of standing out a little more now, but without any sharp edges. We're kind of making them nice and smooth here to give us some more resolution. Okay, next slide. We come in here. Here's the previous one. Here we go back, and now I'm starting to darken some of the warmer, drier areas. And so I'm adding some more contrast to give a little more separation between the cold blues and greens in the upper left from the warm browns and reds in the lower right. And so by doing that, you're sliding these little arrows around on the edit bar, and you're playing with it. And what I have shown you here is probably about 45 minutes worth of work. So 30 to 45, I don't want to discourage anybody, but This is a timely process, but once you have it saved, you save it in a bundle or in the color table, your personal color table or the office color table, then it's there forever. So spend the time there, work the colors that you want to see. If you want to see more focus on the water vapor, you might extend the greens more into Colorado and Kansas and Utah. If you want to see more of the drier areas for whatever reason, fire or wildfire situations, you might extend the browns more in, farther north in this example. Now at this point, we're just about done with the image. We can go ahead and assign it. We can save this now. Go and look at your color window up there. You have save in the lower part of that color edit window. You have save, save as, office save as. A lot of times I'll go ahead and just save it, save as, because I want to assign it a name. I want to put it in my collection of color tables. So I'll click Save As there, and up on top is my name for it. I'll save as, the Save As window will pop up. You change the name of it. In this example, I called it Go 16, Channel 8, 6.19 microns water vapor, and I just put my MRB there. And I'll save that. And later on, I can take that and save that in the Office Save As. If everybody likes it, I can save it into the Office save area. So I go and save it there, and give it a name and save as. And then at this point, before I do that, I like to go down into the imaging tool down in the lower left there. And I might want to go and change the brightness. I still leave the contrast alone. I like 100%. I stay away from the alpha at this point because it does some weird things to the image. I don't know why. But the brightness, I sometimes can lower it, especially when I'm working with the colors in AWIPS. On the graphics, I'll go and kind of adjust the brightness so I can see more of the actual data. So all my image, but with satellite, I leave that alone. I leave the brightness at 100%. So you can adjust it if you want before you save it. Once you make that adjustment in the lower left, you come back to your tool up there, and you go ahead and save that, give it a name, and save it in your own personal menu or in the Office save menu, and then you have that saved in. Here's an example. This is a looping of the default color curve, just to show you. This is the 6.19 that I just finished working on. This is the default, just a kind of a short loop of the water vapor, and this is how it would look. So my goal is, at this point, and what you would want to ask yourself or tell people is, before you start the process of editing an image, you ask yourself, what do I want to enhance? What do I want to accomplish? What do I want to present? What is the most important feature on the satellite image? And with water vapor, to me, is I want to see the fields, of course, of enhanced water vapor, but I also want to be able to see small features inside that moisture field, such as an example. This was a good example. Looking at the default water color curve, focus on Colorado in the lower center, center left there. You can see some mountain waves, some trap waves coming off of the front range there. It shows up pretty decent here, even in the water vapor, default water vapor curve. But I'm going to show you. Now take a look at the default, the new color table that I created there. Look at the difference again. I'm going to flip-flop back and forth. You can see the waves coming across Utah, the standing waves. You can actually see there's a little milkiness in eastern Utah. It's kind of difficult to pick up, but there is a little streamer water vapor that could provide the moisture needed for some afternoon springtime convection. Those things are pretty subtle, and I've learned over the years that those are the ones that catch a lot of us forecasters off guard. It's just these little subtle waves of moisture. Now here's the enhancement. This one shows it a little better. You can actually see it moving across eastern Utah there, the trap waves in eastern Colorado. And so there's just some of the features. And even inside the main moisture plume up there, you can see more distinction of where the moisture really is saturated. In southwest Wyoming, there's that mountain wave that you thought was more just high-level moisture, but that could just be a signature of a mountain wave. So back again, we have that. And there. So this is what you have to decide. What do you want to focus on and how to play the colors? Here's another example of 0.64. This is a visible. Now, when I started working on this is kind of like a pseudo-geocolor, but now we have the geocolor curve. It's fantastic. I just love it. I probably use that about 90% of the time, but I do sometimes go back to my visible color curve to see some of the local features along the front range here in Colorado. And so I try to, goal of this was to improve the contrast between the colors and the ground. So you'll see in a second here, that's the number one point here. I think that's what I wanted to stress more about all these points here. Here's the default color curve that we're getting fed to at the offices here, and this is the default color table. What really strikes me is the muted color, the contrast, the lack of contrast between the ground and the color here that we're getting with the visible 0.64. So I went in and I thought I wanted to latch on, get some more contrast, and here I went in and I'll show you how I did that, but here's the muted color, and here, visible curve, and then there's the enhanced one that I worked on. I just wanted to bring out some of the convection, for instance, up in Montana and eastern in Minnesota. You can see the tops of the clouds a little better between that. It just kind of brings it out. I wanted to pop the colors, the contrast between the ground and cloud features by just changing, just a very subtle change in the color editor. Some gravity waves, some mountain waves moving off the front range there. They seem to stand out a little better with this new color curve. And the arrows there in Utah and Colorado, a lot of times you can't see the terrain with the old one. So I just kind of bring them out, and it makes them snap out. This is kind of like a geocolor-like curve that I built, just to kind of bring out some of the terrain, but it still doesn't have any, doesn't compare to the geocolor. But it's local. And one other feature, I like this. Look up in southern Minnesota and Wisconsin there. I don't have it highlighted. You see there's kind of a milky white area there. It didn't really stand out. I almost missed it the first time I looked at this image. But when I did my enhancement, you can see right away all the rivers and the dendritic rivers and rivers. That's a snow band across Minnesota and Wisconsin. Look at the difference there. It's kind of muted on the default one, but you get the new one, and it's looking really great and sharp. You can see right the very edges, right to the edge of the snow up there with this new color table. There's the two color bands that we've been talking about, editors here. On the left is the default. On the right is the new one. Really, the only change I made to this color table for the 0.64 was in the left side of that graphic, the bar. You notice how gradual the grays transition from right to left? It's a very laminar, it's a very continuous gradation. But I started playing with the visual to get some more enhancement of those bright clouds. So what I did was I extended the bright white colors, the lighter colors, and I extended that area of lightness to the left as far as I could without washing out the ground. And so it's just a kind of a playing, and you'll notice that the grays, the darker colors on the right editor screen are really compact on the left side of that bar there. And I've even added some greens and browns in there. That gives it that geocolor look. And so I found that breakoff point where it went from kind of a gray to a greenish brown. That was my distinction between the cloud and the ground. And that was just a judgment call that was playing with it to the point where I actually going back and forth. I was able to distinguish the cloud from the ground, and it really makes the clouds pop. And I also added more white to the tops of the clouds so the sun's shining on them. It really makes those big, tall, towering cumulus pop out. So there's just some little tricks of the trade, just a little practice will help you slide that around. Again, I left the alphas alone. I didn't play with that on that. You notice they're still maxed out. Getting near the end here, here's another example. This is a 7.34 water vapor. This is the default color. People in the office like this one. I like it too. It just, to me, had the colors were just a bit too strong. And the edges to the colors between the darks and the warms and the dries and the colds, the dry and the wet, and the warm and the cold areas were a little sharp, and I felt like I was losing a little detail, especially the transition from the orange to the red. So I went ahead and played with it. And so now this is the new color table. I have 2 or 3 versions, but this is one I like to use. Focus on Montana and Wyoming up there. You notice the top, that's a mountain wave signature up there along the east slope of the Rockies of Montana. You notice the green on the tops of those clouds. They're pretty subtle. They're really muted. You really can't get any good depth. My goal was to get kind of a 3D appearance. And a lot of times I work with these colors to just create that snapping thing that just kind of jumps out of the screen. I'm always wanting the 3D effect type of thing. And so I went in and I tried to get some distinction on the tops of those CB's wave clouds. And so I've added some more resolution. So I've decided to work more on the higher cloud tops, even off the east coast, off of Virginia there. You can see some good resolution in the tops of those clouds off the coast there, but playing with that end of the color table. So that was my goal there. And I kind of muted the real bright fiery reds in there to get more of a nice gradual transition to get some of the subtle colors even in the dry areas. So that was my goal there, playing with that. And I also brought in some colors that, to me, it may not apply to everybody, but to me, the greens and browns tell me moisture. They just refer to moisture. And the browns and reds and the yellows just come to me as being warmer and drier. So that's all I've done there, is to go from that to kind of more of a subtle, more gradual transitions, and picked up on the moistures of the greens and the blues. Here's another quick one here. This is with the 1.61 micron near water vapor. I just have infrared. I just was playing this one day, and all of a sudden this popped at me, and I go, wow, look how this turned out. This is down, obviously off the coast of Florida and the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic there, and it just amazed me how I was able to look at the small cloud formations off the east coast of Florida, compare it to the default color up there where the ocean is black, and I was able to make the ocean, the water areas, blue, and that gave me more resolution, more separation between the cloud and the water surface. And when you're zooming in, maybe that's a critical thing, watching a land sea breeze coming on shore. You can also see the very wet Everglades area. This is for the geography in me. I see the greens and browns stand out. You can just see that real wet Everglades area down there by making this subtle change in the color table there. Here's another subtle adjustment, same 1.61 micron near infrared. I kind of focused, you can see what you can do with your color curves. You notice up there just north of Minnesota, northern Minnesota, it's a nice gray in the default. It's just kind of a darker area up there, but I was able to kind of actually bring out some of that snow, water, wet soil area cover up there, wet soils, ice covers. That was just something I wanted to do that day, so I was able to adjust it on the fly, and I was able to bring out some of those features. And that's what gives the edit table window, gives you that opportunity to make those changes. If you need to focus on something like that, you can go in there and make these changes. And it really stands out. That also, notice the lakes are all nice and blue. You can see all the rivers in blue. Geography things, but there's a lot of weather in here. You can see the streamers across the northern peninsula of Michigan. Look at those cloud bands coming across, those cloud streaks coming off of Lake Superior. They seem to stand out a lot more with that particular editing. This is one I'm going to probably get real close to editing here. This is when it really is important, especially in the fire season. We got the 3.9 on top, 3.9 on the bottom is the new one. You notice the black dots there are the burn areas. That's where active fires are going. Now this looks like a pretty good, that's fine that we did that. But when we get into the hot seasons, you go, well, why not I just use the top one and forget about the bottom. When we get into the hot summer seasons, the warmer ground almost turns black, and you literally lose the specks. We've been there. I've done that. I've seen. I'll lose the actual fire signatures on the 3.9 because the ground, the hot ground, almost turns black, and it washes out the actual fires. And so doing this, I've muted the grays, the ground, and so even in the hot seasons, the fires still stand out. So this is an adjustment that really comes in handy to pick out these fires here by just kind of muting to adjust the season from winter to summer. And last, this is just another example of 10.35. The top is the default, and all I've done is just make a little tweak there on just to bring out some of the features. The cold air coming down out of Canada, you can see that, the bluish colors there. The snow band across Minnesota, you can't really see it in this one, but this one, the new one, you can. And here's just a loop of that same one we just saw. There's the default one. Look at the streamers going across the lower peninsula, the snow streamers there, the cloud bands. And then look how they stand out with the new color band. They really are striking there. And you can actually see, going back once again, the snow band across northwest Iowa, southeast Minnesota, and northern Wisconsin. There's the default curve, and there's the other one, so the new one. So these are just subtle adjustments. Maybe this is what you want to focus on that day or that week, give you an idea where all your snow fields are and the cold air coming down. So these are some of the different ideas I'm trying to give you to use the tool to highlight some of the features, ground features and cloud features.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So, if you have new color tables, and as Mike does, what's going to happen is Mike will be submitting some of these to a repository on the VLab. Now, there's a panel that will look at potential curves and decide if they should be here, but this is all under development. But it will soon start getting populated. But you'll be able to also submit your own for potential approval onto this site. And that's where you'd be able to download color tables that are available to share. And that's all we had. And I guess, Dan, do we have time for a few questions for Mike?
Yeah. Does anybody have questions for Mike?
Hey, Mike, this is Chris from Wichita.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, have you by chance messed around with any of the color curves on the RGB composite product?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Is that a little more difficult than the baseline product?
It's not intuitive. There's only three little bands you have to slide back and forth, but you have to kind of jockey around back and forth, slide them around. It's a trial and error. There's more trial and error, and I still use it. I've used it even on a couple of them. There's not a lot of them like that, but yes, I have used that, and it's just a trial and error. Just slide them back and forth until you get it. You know, also there's not just the bands. There's numbers. There's a little block that you adjust from 1.0. You go up and down. You can do it that way too as well. That's a faster way of doing it, but it's a little notchy compared to using the slide bars. But yes, I've definitely used that. I've got 2 or 3 color tables that I've already developed using that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So is that using the composite options?
Yes.
I believe, this is Scott at Simpson, I believe that menu is supposed to change at some point, so it's not 0 to 255. It's the actual values of reflectance or brightness temperature.
Oh, good.
In a future version of AWIPS.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Maybe before you retire.
I hope. Thanks.
So are the color tables you create aren't necessarily to be used the entire year?
That is an excellent question. I was going to bring that point up. I have actually it's not a yearly thing. I have diurnal curves. I have early morning, late afternoon as one curve, and then I have a kind of a midday curve, and I do that with more with the visibles and near visibles. I don't necessarily do the water vapors and IR because they're not impacted so much. But yes, the diurnal from wintertime and then to the summertime, higher and lower sun angles. Really, that's an excellent question. I slipped that. I didn't get to that. But yes, I have multiple curves tables that I use, and I call up, and the offices start to use them now too. They'll look at it early morning. You know, you've got the fog situation out there, and you want to highlight the fog. And if you're going to use the default, it's in pitch black until like 8 o'clock in the morning in the wintertime. But I've got low light imaging curves that I can actually pick it up just right at twilight. They start showing up to some of the fog banks out there. So that's a fun thing to play with. If you use the tool, you can really bring those areas out.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. Good question. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Tim Schmidt, known as Madison, Wisconsin. Can you remind me how many bits you have total in these enhancements? As you know, in the old days, we just had, 8-bit, 0 to 255. Are these all like 11-bit, or what's your default?
Start with the default color table.
Like 245, or how many? What's your range, if you will?
Is this Tim?
This is Tim.
Hey, Tim. He starts with the default ones for Go 16.
Okay. So, for example, if you would have started with an 11-bit one, you'll end with 11-bit one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's not starting with the old ones. He's starting with the new ones and then going from there. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
I was going to say, this is Bernie from CIRA, and I would just say thanks for your presentation. What I heard you say often is you were just trying to bring out the contrast, and I think that's a wonderful point. And the variability. And would you say that, just having experience of looking at the imagery and knowing what the background is and how you can adjust it has helped you also modify the images and the color tables?
Oh, by far.
As you use two, sometimes you'll look at two images at the same time. Yeah.
Oh, yes. I'll go back and forth, and I'll use the two screens to look at the default color and the color curve, and I'll go back and forth. really just understanding your local weather. Around here we have mountain waves, we have rotor clouds, and so I'm going back and forth from the default, and I'm playing back and forth between the new one and the default one to try to make those things pop out. I had a couple of weeks ago, we had a cold front coming, a shallow cold front, and I was able to enhance that cold front coming down all the way from North Dakota. It was just really cool how you can bring that out. And again, it's just knowing what you're trying to represent in the satellite, and then playing with it and trying to bring that out. And I think there was something else you pointed out there that you asked about. I'm trying to remember. There was the first part of your question there.
Yeah, it was just about just looking at the imagery every day and pointing out features. I notice that sometimes in the past when we've had weather briefings up here at CIRA, Ed can fill you in a little more, but just having someone else point it out, and then it wasn't obvious until somebody pointed out. So it sounds like you're sharing the information in your office as well, so that's great.
Yeah, I'm just very excited to be able to share it with everybody too now. Finally getting out this way. This is great. Thanks for the question, Bernie.
Okay, any more questions or comments for Mike?
Yeah, hey Dan, it's Brian. Question for Mike.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Mike. In terms of the color choices, you talked a couple of times about using the muted colors instead of the brighter colors. And does that play in with overlays, like if you're overlaying RUC analyses or forecasts or other plots of data? Could you talk about that?
Yes, I can. You can't really, to my knowledge, I don't believe you can. If you put a satellite on the screen, you can't. I think you can combine. Come to think of it, you can combine. You can. You can combine, but it's kind of a risky way of doing it because the colors really get distorted when you start flipping back and forth between a satellite image and an image of something off of the RUC. I guess it's possible.
Or did you mean just contours, Brian?
Yeah, no, I was talking more about the contours and
yeah, sure, I do that all the time. Yeah.
The overlays.
Oh yes, do that all the time.
So he's suggesting that when you go from the brighter colors to more muted, you can probably see the contours better.
Yes, Brian, that's exactly right. That's another reason why I've kind of muted some of the color contrasts on the table there, so you can see more of the contours. And then I'll use that other image adjusting tool to mute the satellite down a little bit so you can see more of the color tools. That's where that image adjustment tool comes in. So when you're building a bundle, you can mute down the background, which would be the satellite image, and then have all the overlays on top of it. So that's where they work together.
All right, very good. Thanks.
And you kind of jogged my memory. I'm running over. I'm trying to make this real quick. Another reason why I make these color tools, I work with somebody I know and love, and I won't mention his name, but he's colorblind. And so this person will walk in. I don't want to know if he wants me to disclose his name, but he'll walk in and he says, I can't see that. So he starts working with me on that, and he'll say, can you bring these colors out? And so with the color edit tool, I can go in there and create, and I'll actually have tables labeled color curve, color blind tool, and I can adjust that. So if you have somebody in your office that's colorblind, they can work with you on that, and you can bring out the reds and the blues so that the grays and the greens won't blend in the background, and they can actually see features. So that's another really cool thing about working with the color edit tool. You can help the people that are colorblind in your office to really make the satellite images pop out.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.